Welcome to TOCHI Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. The aroma of sizzling palm oil filled the narrow, dusty street of Yumu's village as Mama Evelyn stirred her blackened frying pan, sweat dripping down her wrinkled face. She squatted beside her small akara stand, not because she didn't own a stool, but because sitting felt like a luxury when you had school fees to chase. Her fingers, blistered and scarred from years of firewood cooking, moved quickly as she scooped dollops of bean batter into the oil. Her eyes kept darting toward the road, waiting for a customer, praying for a miracle. Her son Denzel would be sitting for his final WEC exams in a week, but they hadn't bought the form yet. She had sold all the plantains from her backyard and even her favorite wrapper, yet the money still wasn't enough. That morning, as the church bells rang in the distance, she made a decision that would shake the foundation of her health. She would donate blood to raise the final amount. At the local health clinic, the nurse stared at her emaciated frame with concern. "Mama Evelyn, are you sure you want to do this?" she asked softly, pressing a cotton pad to Evelyn's paper-thin skin. But Evelyn just smiled and nodded. "My son must not miss that exam. He must become something in this life." When the needle slid in, Evelyn winced but didn't cry. Her body was tired, but her spirit roared. Hours later, she used the little money given to her for the blood donation to purchase Denzel's WEC form and a pair of used black shoes from the roadside. She walked barefoot back to her stall, bloodless and dizzy, but she was smiling. That evening, as the sun melted behind the clouds and the street thinned to life, she fainted beside her akara stand. When neighbors rushed her into the house, Denzel knelt beside her, tears falling freely as she weakly opened her eyes and whispered, "I did it for you, my son. Make me proud." That night, under the flickering light of a kerosene lamp, he held her frail hand and vowed, "Mama, I will make your name a crown. I will never forget this day." What Denzel didn't know was that this very promise, so sacred and pure in his heart at the time, would one day be tested against the allure of wealth and acceptance. As his mother lay asleep on a bamboo mat, still shivering from weakness, Denzel stared out the window of their mud house at the stars, imagining Lagos, imagining glory. But he also imagined returning one day with cars, gifts, and a name people would chant. He imagined lifting her from the village and putting her in a mansion where she would never have to fry akara again. "Just a little more suffering, Mama," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "I'll take us out of here." In that quiet moment, drenched in dreams and the scent of palm oil, a seed was planted in his heart, a seed that would grow, twist, and someday turn on its roots. The morning Denzel was set to leave for Lagos, the compound was already alive with villagers, some out of genuine pride, others out of idle curiosity. Mama Evelyn had borrowed a travel bag from the local pastor and packed all of Denzel's belongings, mostly faded clothes, a few notebooks, and a tin of groundnut she had roasted overnight. Her eyes were puffed from crying, but she still smiled through it. She had used the last of her savings, money she had hidden inside the hollow of a broken mortar, to pay for his transport and a small deposit at the school's hostel. The night before, she had pressed his palms tightly and said, "Never forget the child of whom you are. Even if the world calls me wretched, remember who scraped cassava peels just to feed you." Denzel nodded solemnly. They didn't hug often, but that day they held on to each other like the wind might blow them apart. The journey to Lagos was rough. The bus was crowded, hot, and filled with strangers, but Denzel's heart beat with hope. He looked out the window at the changing landscape, the village trees giving way to tarred roads and rising buildings. It felt like he had been transported into another life. By the time they arrived at Djibouti, he was dizzy from excitement. Lagos was fast, loud, chaotic. Everything Yumu's was not. The first few weeks were hard. He struggled to adjust, often missing home, especially when he saw mothers visiting their children on campus. Evelyn couldn't afford such visits. Instead, she sent letters, handwritten, scented with camphor, always ending with the same line, "No matter how far, my love follows you." Denzel would smile when he read them, but gradually, The rhythm of the city began to chip away at the innocence he carried. The pressure to blend in started with little things, mocking his village accent, saving to buy better clothes, even lying about where he was from. His roommates would laugh when he spoke about Accra, calling it village breakfast. To fit in, Denzel started staying silent about his roots. He told himself it was temporary, that he would come back for Mama once he made it. But the longer he stayed in the city, the less frequent his replies became. Evelyn, on the other hand, still woke at 5 a.m. to pray for him, cook for neighbors, and boast to anyone who cared to listen. "My son is studying with white people's computers now. Soon you'll see him on TV." Her pride never waned. But in Lagos, her name was beginning to fade from Denzel's tongue. Years of sleepless nights, late-night hustling, and unpaid internships finally paid off when Denzel's startup, Next Edge Systems, caught the attention of a European angel investor. His software, designed to streamline online marketplace logistics, was called a revolution in African tech. Suddenly, he was being invited to conferences, landing in business magazines, and receiving calls from people who once ignored him. The money started flowing, and with it came the designer suits, new accent, and elite parties. He rented a duplex in Lekki Phase 1, hired a personal chef, and got a new number. Mama Evelyn was proud. She saw a photo of his launch party in a local newspaper, but she didn't understand why her son no longer picked her calls. Maybe network, she told herself. Maybe he's busy being important. But when months passed and her letters came back unopened, her faith began to tremble. One particular phone call marked the shift. She had borrowed a neighbor's phone and called during a break in his board meeting. When he saw the name Mama, he ignored it the first time. When it rang again, he picked, but his voice was cold. "Mama, I'm in a meeting. Please, I'll call you back." She had only wanted to say she missed him and that the cassava harvest had been good this year. But he never did call back. From then on, Evelyn stopped calling. She began to talk to him in her prayers instead. Meanwhile, Denzel began avoiding anything that reminded him of where he came from. He stopped using his native name Chukwunzel and introduced himself only as Denzel Obi. He replaced his mother's framed picture on his desk with a cityscape of Dubai. His assistant, seeing an old photo of his Accra stand in his drawer, offered to dispose of it. He said nothing, and the photo disappeared. The wealth brought power, but it also brought shame cloaked in luxury. And the more Denzel built himself in the eyes of the world, the more invisible Evelyn became. It was not that he hated her. It was that he feared she didn't fit into the polished world he now occupied. His conversations became rehearsed, his memories selectively filtered. And in all his conferences, speeches, and interviews, he never once mentioned the woman who gave him everything: her blood, her sleep, her sandals, and her soul. Denzel first met Vanessa Ikenna at an exclusive investment summit hosted at the Eco Hotel. She stood out not because of her looks, though she was undoubtedly stunning, but because of how unapologetically elite she was. Her presence was loud, her perfume louder, and her last name loudest of all. The daughter of Chief Ikenna, one of Nigeria's most feared and revered real estate moguls, Vanessa carried herself like royalty, her tongue dipped in pride and entitlement. When she was introduced to Denzel, she gave him a once-over before smiling faintly and saying, "You clean up well for a self-made man." That backhanded compliment should have raised a flag, but Denzel was too enamored. Vanessa represented everything he had chased for years: status, respect, access to circles that once mocked his background. She was a golden ticket into the highest echelons of the rich and powerful. They exchanged numbers, and that night, Denzel updated his social media bio: visionary, CEO, innovator. He was ready for his next transformation. As the weeks turned into months, Vanessa became a permanent fixture in Denzel's life. Her friends welcomed him, albeit reluctantly at first, constantly reminding him, directly or otherwise, that he was a Lagos miracle, not one of them by birthright. Denzel laughed it off, playing along with the charade, never correcting their assumptions that he had come from a wealthy home in Enugu. When Vanessa once asked where his parents lived, he paused before answering, "Abroad mostly. My mother travels a lot." The lie rolled off his tongue too easily, and instead of feeling guilty, he felt relieved, free from the burden of explaining Mama Evelyn's acrostand, her mud house, her wrappers stained with palm oil. When Vanessa mocked bush mothers who still cooked with firewood and spoke in dialect, Denzel only chuckled and said, "You'd be surprised how many still live that way." That laughter, harmless in sound but deadly in spirit, was the moment a line was crossed. The more he fell under Vanessa's influence, the more Denzel rewrote his own history. He changed the narrative, distancing himself from anything that could be perceived as local. When Evelyn called to ask if he received the herbal medicine she sent for his occasional migraines, he dismissed it. "Mama, I don't need Agbo and Lecky. I have doctors now." Vanessa once overheard the call and burst into laughter. "Please tell me your mother isn't still into those village herbs," she said. Denzel didn't defend her. Instead, he replied with a smirk, "Old habits die hard." That night, Evelyn's number was saved under Do Not Pick in his phone. The same woman who once tied plantain peels around his feverish body to bring his temperature down was now an embarrassment. And yet, even then, Mama Evelyn remained proud, still praying nightly that her big man son would never forget his roots. Little did she know, those roots were already being buried under cement, wine, and Vanessa's designer heels. Mama Evelyn spent 3 days preparing for Denzel's 32nd birthday. She had heard from a distant cousin who saw it mentioned on Instagram that her son was planning a big party in Lagos. He hadn't told her, hadn't invited her, but she didn't mind. "Maybe he wanted to surprise me," she whispered to herself. With trembling hands, she fried dozens of acro balls and wrapped them carefully in banana leaves, his childhood favorite. She also packed roasted groundnuts in small nylon bags and added a handwritten card that said, "From your mother, who never stopped praying for you." Her neighbor, Aya Remy, lent her a white lace wrapper, and Mama Evelyn took a public bus from Umuz to Lagos, carrying her small parcel of love like it was gold. The journey was long and bumpy. Her back ached, her legs were swollen, but her spirit was high. "My son is a big man now," she kept repeating to herself. "Today I will see him." She arrived at the massive Lecky mansion as guests in sparkling gowns and tuxedos flowed through the gates. Denzel's name was printed in gold letters on a marble board. "Happy birthday, the future of tech." Mama Evelyn was in awe. The house was like something out of the television. Lights everywhere, people laughing in English that felt foreign, waiters carrying wine glasses. She walked slowly to the gate, clutching her parcel, her heart pounding. "I'm here to see my son, Denzel. I'm his mother," she said softly to the security men at the gate. They looked her up and down and exchanged glances. One of them picked up his walkie-talkie. "There's one old woman here. Says she's the boss's mother. Should we send her away?" The voice that came back chilled her bones. "Boss said he has no mother in this country. Get rid of her quietly." The guard returned, his tone stiff. "Madam, this party is strictly by invitation. You have to leave." The gate shut in her face. She stood there for hours, hoping someone would recognize her, hoping Denzel would come out. But no one did. The laughter inside grew louder, the music wilder. Her eyes welled up not because of the rejection alone, but because in that moment, she realized her son had truly forgotten her. She placed the acra down gently by the wall and turned to walk away. As she stepped into the street, her legs gave out. She collapsed right there, her wrapper dusty, her gift untouched. A passerby helped her up and offered to call someone, but she just shook her head. "No need. My son is busy. He's important now." That night, she slept on the bench outside a nearby kiosk, hugging her empty bag, praying, not for herself, but for Denzel, that his heart would one day remember where it began. Just a few weeks after his grand birthday party, Denzel received an exclusive dinner invitation to meet Vanessa's parents privately. It was a rite of passage, a signal that they were finally taking him seriously as a suitor. Vanessa was glowing with excitement, and Denzel was nervous but eager to impress. He wore his most expensive black tuxedo and rehearsed small talk about foreign investments, golf, and private schools. Vanessa had warned him earlier, My parents don't do village talk. Don't mention any poor relatives. Okay? It ruins the aesthetic. Denzel nodded. By now, the idea of Mama Evelyn showing up at any event had become his greatest fear. That dinner was more than just a meal. It was a transaction, a test of his transformation. He was no longer the Acro woman's son. He was now Denzel Obi, CO. Polished, refined, ready. The dining room of the Ikena's Victoria Island mansion was intimidating. Massive chandeliers, gold-rimmed plates, foreign servants, and a kind of silence that judged you before you spoke. Chief Ikena sat at the head of the table like a king, his wife beside him draped in diamonds. After the main course, the questioning began. So Denzel, where are your people from? We've never heard about your family, Chief Ikena asked with piercing eyes. Denzel's heart thudded. For a second, he saw Mama Evelyn's smile flash in his mind. Then he swallowed and replied, I lost my parents early. Grew up mostly in boarding schools and under a few guardians abroad. Vanessa reached under the table and squeezed his hand approvingly. Her mother nodded slowly, saying, That explains your composure. You're not one of those village boys looking for who to elevate their family with marriage. The compliment hit like acid in his chest, but he smiled and thanked her. That night, as Denzel lay on the softest bed in Vanessa's guest room, his mind spun. He had told the lie so smoothly it scared him. There was no hesitation, no crack in his voice. He had buried Mama Evelyn with his words while she was still alive. In a village hot hundreds of kilometers away, she was lying on a raffia mat, fighting body aches, whispering prayers over a faded photo of him. But in Lagos, her son was clinking glasses with people who didn't think she was good enough to be acknowledged. Later that night, Denzel blocked her number completely. He told himself it was for peace, that success required boundaries. But the truth was bitter. He was ashamed of the very woman who once sold her blood to give him life. Back in the dusty lanes of Yumu's village, Mama Evelyn's body began to rebel against her sacrifices. The long nights without proper sleep, the stress of worrying over her son's silence, the skipped meals to save money for letters that returned unopened. All of it had taken a toll. She often sat outside her mud house in the early mornings, clutching her chest as a silent pain throbbed from within. Her neighbors had noticed the weight loss, the slight tremble in her fingers, the growing forgetfulness. But Mama Evelyn always waved it off. Old age is just greeting me early, she joked. In truth, she was afraid, not just of death, but of dying without seeing Denzel one more time. Her only son, her only family, now felt like a ghost she couldn't touch. Every evening, she placed his old secondary school photo on her lap and whispered prayers over it, asking God to keep him safe and guide him back to her. It was a ritual wrapped in heartbreak. One morning, as she carried a small bowl of soaked Gary to break her fast, she felt a sharp jolt in her chest and collapsed on the front porch. The bowl shattered and scattering. A neighbor, Mama F., rushed out screaming. They carried her to the local health center where the nurse, alarmed by her blood pressure and weakness, advised immediate transfer to a better-equipped hospital in Succa. But there was no money. Mama Evelyn lay on a rusted cot, eyes barely open, whispering, Call my son. Denzel will come. Mama F., out of desperation, asked the village pastor to write a letter and send it to Lagos. They pooled together what little they had to pay for the postage, enclosing Evelyn's hospital note and plea. Please tell my son I need him. Just to hear his voice again would heal me. They addressed it to his company office, hoping someone would deliver it into the right hands. But the letter never reached Denzel's hands. It was intercepted by his personal assistant, who sorted daily mail and often tossed away anything that looked like a personal appeal or begging letter. Seeing the tattered envelope with smudged ink and an unregistered sender, she dumped it in the trash. She had been instructed months ago to screen all incoming mail and ignore anything from old connections. When Denzel came in that morning for a meeting, he walked past the garbage bin that held his mother's final call for help. He never noticed. And so, while Mama Evelyn lay shivering on a hospital bed with dry lips and a cracked voice, whispering his name in half-conscious prayers, her son was on a yacht off Banana Island, toasting champagne with Vanessa and a group of foreign investors. One woman clinging to breath. One man intoxicated by success. Two worlds that once held each other, now drifting further than oceans apart. Denzel sat confidently in the gleaming studio of Galaxy Network, dressed in a sleek blue suit that hugged his frame perfectly, his wristwatch glinting under the studio lights. The host, a respected business journalist, smiled as he praised Denzel's rise from obscurity to tech dominance. "So tell us," the host asked with a warm grin, "who inspired you the most? Who kept you grounded through the difficult days?" The question hung in the air like a loaded bullet. Denzel leaned forward, smiled thoughtfully, then said, "I'd say, God and personal discipline. I've always believed in pushing myself beyond limits. I wasn't handed anything." The host nodded, impressed. But far away, in a village hospital, Mama Evelyn's old television, propped on a stool by a shaky antenna, flickered with his face. Her thin, cracked lips parted slowly in a soft smile, her eyes lighting up with maternal pride. "That's my son," she whispered to a nurse standing by. But then she heard his words. Her smile faded instantly as his voice continued. No handouts, no family backing, just a vision and drive. "I created myself." Her weak hand dropped the TV remote. The nurse, not understanding the gravity of what she was witnessing, said softly, "Mama, isn't he talking about you?" But Evelyn remained silent, eyes wide with disbelief. She had scrubbed latrines for him, sold mangoes on the roadside, donated blood, fainted from hunger. Yet he credited no one, not even the memory of her. The nurse adjusted her pillow and walked away, humming. But Evelyn just lay there, tears rolling silently down the sides of her face, soaking into the pillow. For the first time, she didn't whisper a prayer for him. That night, she turned the TV to the wall. She didn't have the strength to watch the world celebrate a man who had buried the truth of who raised him. Meanwhile, the interview went viral. People praised Denzel's humility, his work ethic, his brilliance. He gained thousands of new followers. Vanessa reposted the clip with the caption, "A king who made himself. So proud of you, baby." Denzel's team sent a mass email. Mr. Obi is the perfect example of vision over victimhood. But buried deep in the quiet village of Umuz, a woman who once believed she was part of his story now realized she had become a secret. She was not even a footnote in his grand narrative. And in that realization, something in her heart broke, not just from grief, but from the loneliness that comes when your love has been erased publicly by the person you gave everything for. Her blood, her sleep, her very name, vanished in the name of branding. Just as Denzel's interview continued making waves, a Twitter thread began trending unexpectedly. It was written by an old schoolmate of his from the village, a girl named Mwakigo, who had watched the interview in disbelief. Her first post read, "Funny how Denzel Obi claims no one helped him. Let me tell you about the Accra woman who sold firewood and blood just to send him to school." The thread detailed how Mama Evelyn used to fetch water from the stream before dawn, how she would tie her wrappers tightly and hawk roasted corn late into the night just to pay for extra lessons. Nwakigo described in vivid detail how Evelyn once fainted during PTA day, unable to afford transport, but too determined to miss her son's performance. The thread went viral, with photos of Evelyn frying Accra beside a wooden stall and an old image of young Denzel standing barefoot next to her. The internet exploded with mixed emotions, praise, criticism, and questions. At first, Denzel dismissed the thread as a cheap attempt at clout chasing. He instructed his PR team to ignore it, saying, "People from the past always want to attach themselves when you make it." But the story refused to die. More classmates chimed in, backing Mwakigo's claims. Journalists started reaching out for comment. A lifestyle blogger even wrote, "Denzel Obi, the man who made it or the son who forgot." The pressure mounted. Vanessa was furious, not because the story might be true, but because it threatened her image of Denzel as fully elite. "Why didn't you just tell me your mother was an Accra seller?" she hissed. "We could have built a new narrative around it." But Denzel wasn't ready for the truth. He angrily tweeted, "I don't know why people enjoy fabricating sob stories. Let's focus on building, not dragging." That tweet became his downfall. screenshots of his old school records, neighbors' testimonies, and even a teacher's tribute to Mama Evelyn began circulating. The public began to wonder, was this man truly self-made, or did he bury the hands that lifted him? Still, Denzel refused to back down. He held a press briefing, called the story a distraction, and blamed the desperation of jealous villagers. Mama Evelyn heard the broadcast from a radio her neighbor brought into the hospital. She didn't cry this time. She simply turned her face to the wall and stopped speaking for the rest of the day. The betrayal was no longer about what he said. It was about what he refused to say. In trying to rise, Denzel had pushed her so far into the shadows that she began to fade from the world, not just in body, but in spirit. And the most painful part? He didn't even notice. It began with an envelope, plain, worn, and without a return address, slipped quietly into the narrow slot beneath Mama Evelyn's door. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, the faded gold edges glinting under the sunlight. Inside, a neatly folded invitation card bore Denzel's name in embossed letters, Denzel Obi Foundation Charity Gala, honoring the pillars of greatness. The moment she read those words, something fluttered inside her, a flicker of hope, thin but steady. Perhaps this was his way of reaching out, of restoring what the city had stolen from their bond. She didn't know who had sent it, but in her heart, she believed it was her son. That night, she brought out her old sewing needle and began mending her only decent wrapper. With every stitch, she whispered, "He hasn't forgotten me after all. He still remembers." She spent the next 2 days preparing, borrowing shoes from a neighbor, and using the last of her saved coins to buy transport fare to Lagos. The journey from Umeus to Lagos was harsher than she remembered. Her back ached from the bumpy ride, and her swollen feet throbbed by the time she arrived at the venue, an opulent event center covered in gold balloons, crystal chandeliers, and marble walkways. Well-dressed guests walked past her without notice, their perfumes clashing with the scent of the balm she had rubbed on her joints. She clutched her invitation card tightly, her Bible tucked under her armpit, and joined the line. When she reached the registration desk, the young woman behind the tablet frowned and scanned the list. "What's your name again, Ma?" Evelyn spoke slowly, shyly, almost unsure. "Evelyn Obi. I'm Denzel's mother." The woman paused, looked again, then leaned to whisper to a colleague. After a moment, she returned with a cold smile. "Sorry, you're not on the guest list. This invitation might have been sent in error." Evelyn's hand trembled. "Please, I came from far. Tell him I'm here, just for 1 minute." The staff refused. A security officer was called. Other guests stared at her like she was a nuisance, an interruption in their perfectly filtered world. As she pleaded, Vanessa appeared near the entrance in a stunning dress, her arm looped through Denzel's. Evelyn's eyes lit up. "Denzel," she cried. "My son." Denzel froze, eyes wide. For a split second, their gazes met, hers filled with tears, his with panic. "Who is that woman?" Vanessa hissed. "She looks insane." Denzel turned, and with a voice like ice said, "I don't know her. Get her out of here." Evelyn's soul cracked. Her knees gave out as security gently but firmly dragged her toward the gate. The crowd murmured. The music played on. She didn't struggle. She didn't scream. She simply wept silently, the invitation slipping from her hand onto the marble floor, smudged now by passing feet. Outside the grand venue, Evelyn sat on a stone bench in the shadows, her wrapper stained by the dust from being dragged and her heart soaked in grief. A young boy selling bottled water passed by and stopped. "Mama, are you okay?" She forced a smile and bought a sachet of water with the last coin in her purse. As she sipped it slowly, her mind replayed the moment Denzel looked her in the eye and said, "I don't know her." The words echoed like thunder in her ears. They didn't hurt because they were harsh. They hurt because they were final. In that moment, she realized she wasn't just forgotten. She was erased. Her son had chosen the world over her. She looked around, watching the flashing lights and laughing faces inside, separated from her by glass. Somewhere in there, her blood, her boy, was dancing, while she sat outside like a stranger. Evelyn didn't have enough money to return to the village that night. A kind street sweeper offered to let her rest on a bench near the car park until morning. As she lay there under the harsh streetlights, people walked past without looking at her. Some assumed she was a beggar. Others gave her pitying glances. But no one knew who she truly was. No one knew that the woman lying outside in a faded wrapper and borrowed shoes had raised the very man being honored inside. She clutched her Bible to her chest and hummed softly an old hymn her mother used to sing. Though the road be rough and stormy, I will never walk alone. Her voice cracked with sorrow, but she kept humming, not because she believed it in that moment, but because it was all she had left. By dawn, her body had grown weaker, her breath shallow, but she managed to rise, wipe her face, and begin the long walk toward the park that would take her back to Yumuse. As the sun rose behind her, so did a deep silence inside her, a resignation. She had no more expectations, no more letters to send. The boy she loved had been buried beneath wealth and shame. Her only prayer now was that God would keep him safe, even if his heart no longer had a place for her. And though every step she took away from Lagos felt like a knife turning in her chest, she held her head high. She would not curse him. She would not speak ill of him. She would simply return home, close her door, and love him silently from afar, until she could no longer. The weeks that followed the gala were a whirlwind for Denzel, but not in the way he had anticipated. The press clippings were glowing, the photos perfect, but Vanessa had become strangely distant. She no longer replied to his messages with her usual warmth. One evening, as he scrolled through her tagged posts on social media, he noticed a story uploaded by one of her close friends at a private beach house. In it, Vanessa was seated beside another man, tall, muscular, and unmistakably wealthy, resting her head on his shoulder. Denzel's heart thudded. He had been financing her lifestyle, buying her designer clothes, renting her penthouse. And now this? He drove to her place, breath heavy, questions burning. When she opened the door, she didn't even flinch. "Oh, so you finally saw it," she said casually, stepping aside to let him in. Denzel's voice was hoarse with disbelief. "How long, Vanessa?" She laughed bitterly. "Don't act shocked. You knew this was transactional. I dated you because you were rising. But darling, I need someone who's already at the top." Denzel clenched his fists. "I gave you everything." She scoffed, arms crossed. "You gave me a mansion, yes. But you also gave me a sob story I had to cover up. A mother who sells akara in a village? Seriously, Denzel? You lied to my parents, to me. You pretended to be clean, but your roots are dirty." Her words cut deeper than any blade. In one breath, she dismissed his love, mocked his mother, and shattered the illusion he had built around her. For the first time in years, Denzel saw her clearly, not as a queen, but as a mirror reflecting everything he had become. But the blow didn't end there. Days later, during a board meeting, one of his top investors announced he was pulling out. When Denzel asked why, he was told, "Check your financial records." That night, he discovered a trail of unauthorized transactions, all linked to Vanessa's cousin, whom he had hired as CFO on her recommendation. Millions had been diverted. His accounts were bleeding. His lawyers advised damage control, but the press caught wind. The same media that once celebrated his rise now published headlines like Tech King or Tragic Fraud. As everything around him collapsed, one memory haunted him above all. Evelyn's eyes the night he denied her. In that look, she had tried to warn him, not with words, but with heartbreak. But he hadn't listened. And now, as the empire built on pride and betrayal began to fall, Denzel realized that the foundation he ignored was the only one that ever held him. The moment Denzel saw the folded letter resting awkwardly at the corner of his old safe, his heart stuttered. It was hidden beneath old award plaques and stock certificates he hadn't looked at in months. He didn't even remember putting it there. The envelope was soft from age, its edges wrinkled, the ink faded. But the handwriting was unmistakable, neat, careful, and slightly tilted to the left. "To my beloved son, Denzel." His fingers trembled as he picked it up, suddenly aware of the silence in the room. The air felt heavier, the mansion colder. He sat slowly on the edge of his bed, the letter in his lap. He hadn't spoken to his mother in almost a year, hadn't picked her calls, hadn't read her texts. And now here it was, her voice in a letter, preserved like a ghost. For a long moment he just stared at it. Then finally he tore the seal open. Her words hit him like thunder hidden in sunlight. She had written it from the hospital, she said, when she fell ill but didn't want to worry him. She wrote about her chest pains, about collapsing while fetching water, and how she missed the sound of his voice. She spoke of how proud she was of the man he had become, even though he had no time for her anymore. She forgave him again and again in the lines, as if she knew the weight of what he was doing even before he did. I still believe you love me, Denzel. I tell myself you're only busy, that when all this noise ends, you'll come home and we'll sit under the mango tree like we used to. I even made akara last week and imagined you were there eating it with me. The paper was spotted with ink that had bled, tears, maybe, or a water spill. But Denzel knew what it was. His mother had wept writing it. By the time he finished reading, his hands were soaked with sweat, his eyes stinging with guilt. It was as if every denial he had uttered echoed from the walls of the mansion. He remembered her standing outside the gala, remembered pretending not to know her. And now this letter, gentle, loving, forgiving, was the voice he had shut out. Panic gripped him like claws. He grabbed his car keys and bolted from the room, instructing his driver to prepare for an immediate trip to Yumu's. Drive through the night, he ordered. We don't stop. The roads were dark, winding, and long, but his mind raced faster than the wheels. He didn't know if she was still in the hospital or back at home. He didn't care what time he arrived. All he knew was that he had to find her, to fall to his knees and beg, to look her in the eye and say, "Mama, I'm sorry. I remember." But what he didn't know was that time had already taken its toll. The sun had barely risen when Denzel's car pulled into the dusty clearing of Yumu's village. The air was thick with silence. No laughter of children. No smoke rising from fires. Just the soft chirp of birds and the crunch of gravel beneath his tires. He stepped out, heart pounding, eyes scanning the compound. The small mud house he once called home stood unchanged, only now its doors were shut, and a faded cloth hung over the windows like mourning veils. An elderly neighbor, bent with age and leaning on a stick, watched him from across the road. Denzel approached, but before he could speak, the old man shook his head solemnly and pointed to the left. "You're late," he said quietly. "She went to sleep last week." Her heart gave up. Denzel's legs buckled. "What?" he whispered, voice cracking. "She died." The man nodded. "She waited. Every day, she sat by the road, hoping to see you. Even when she couldn't walk well anymore. She would say, 'He's just delayed. Not gone.'" Denzel dropped to the ground, his knees sinking into the soft, red earth. He didn't care that his trousers stained. His vision blurred. "Where is she?" he croaked. The man pointed again, this time toward a small fenced plot behind the house. "Under the mango tree. Her last request." Denzel stumbled toward it, heart crashing against his ribs. There it was, a simple grave. No marble, no monument, just a mound of red earth, freshly covered, with a small wooden cross at the head and a white scarf wrapped around it. Her scarf, the one she always wore when praying for him. He collapsed beside it, hands clutching the soil, tears spilling without restraint. "Mama," he screamed. "Mama, please. I came back. I read your letter. I remember now. Please wake up." But the earth was quiet, still. It did not answer. It only held her now. The sky remained cloudless, but inside Denzel a storm raged. He cried until his voice broke, until his breath hitched, until there was nothing left but silence. Villagers walked past slowly, some in pity, others in judgment. A few shook their heads and muttered, "Now he remembers." But none disturbed him. He lay there until dusk, the weight of everything pressing down on him, every missed call, every blocked number, every lie he told to strangers about the woman who had carried him through fire. Now she was beneath the earth, and he, above it, finally willing to kneel, but far too late. The woman who would have forgiven him in a heartbeat had closed her eyes forever. and the crown she dreamed to wear, seeing her son rise and honor her, had been buried with her unspoken dreams. The next morning, Denzel sat under the mango tree where his mother now rested, numb, eyes hollow. The village pastor arrived gently, a weathered man who had prayed over Evelyn's body and performed her simple funeral rites. He approached with a small wooden box in hand. "Your mother left this for you," he said softly. "She gave it to me 3 days before she passed. Said you might come. She still believed you would." Denzel reached for it slowly, as though afraid it would vanish. Inside was a photograph of him as a child, sitting proudly beside her Acura stand, holding a school certificate with a shy smile. Evelyn in the picture looked younger, her face worn but bright with pride. Beneath the photo was a folded note. Denzel's hands trembled as he opened it. The words, though faint, struck deep. "My son, even if I die before you return, I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. I never held your silence against you. You were my miracle, my every breath. I lived for the day the world would know I raised a good man. If pride ever stole your voice, I forgive you. But remember, greatness without gratitude is like a tree with no roots. It may look tall, but it will fall." Denzel pressed the letter to his chest, sobbing anew. The pastor placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "She loved you until the end, even when you forgot her. She defended you even when people mocked her. And when she was dying, her last words were your name." Denzel broke, not from the shame alone, but from the knowledge that he could never return the love she gave so freely. He had squandered time, precious, irreplaceable time. The pastor stood slowly and said, "You cannot undo the past, Denzel, but you can live in a way that honors her name, not with money or buildings, but with truth, with humility." Denzel nodded silently, tears running unchecked. That day he sat at her grave with nothing but the box in his lap, the photo in his hand, and regret in his soul. There were no paparazzi, no applause, no stage. Just a broken son and a sleeping mother, separated by the earth, united by the pain of what was lost forever. In the breeze that rustled the mango leaves above him, he could almost hear her voice one last time. "Even if I die ashamed, I die loving you." The return to Lagos felt like a walk through a graveyard of everything Denzel once thought made him powerful. As the city skyline reappeared through the dusty windows of his SUV, nothing looked the same anymore. His glass mansion now seemed cold and empty, the silence echoing with memories he never truly appreciated. The walls felt too clean, too quiet, too distant from anything real. He didn't go straight to his room. He walked slowly, touching framed magazine covers and awards that once brought pride. Now they seemed meaningless, hollow testaments to a man who had risen by forgetting the woman who built his wings. The moment he stepped into his bedroom, he sat heavily on the edge of his bed and stared at his reflection in the mirror. His once confident eyes now looked like strangers, dim, ashamed, sunken. The weight of regret suffocated him, and no air conditioner or chilled champagne could ease it. While he mourned, his empire cracked. The news broke out like wildfire. Denzel Obi's company accused of internal fraud. Key investor pulls out. Stock prices tumble. The media that once worshipped him now tore him apart. The financial misappropriation scandal involving Vanessa's cousin became the centerpiece of evening news. Videos of Vanessa partying with her new billionaire lover flooded social media, with blogs mocking Denzel's fall from grace. Within a week, 3 board members resigned. His legal team warned that a lawsuit was imminent, but Denzel barely reacted. He missed board meetings, ignored investor calls. He no longer cared about salvaging what was left. His focus had shifted entirely. What once mattered now meant nothing. Every room in his house haunted him. His study with the letter he ignored, the dining room where he once laughed at Evelyn's cooking, even the guest bathroom where her last package of herbs had once been tossed away in disgust. Denzel spent his nights walking the halls like a ghost, haunted by silence and memory. In the kitchen he tried to make akra, but the oil burned and the batter fell apart. He dropped to the floor, crying. He lit candles in her memory, but blew them out halfway through. It wasn't enough. Nothing was. He tried donating a portion of his wealth in her name, but the gesture rang hollow. He even planned a tribute event, but canceled it the day before. You don't give a rose to a grave when you could have given it to a living hand, he muttered to himself, voice trembling. His mother didn't need a monument. She needed acknowledgement, love, gratitude. And now, even if he built her a temple, it would still rise over the echo of her final words, buried beneath the red earth. The collapse wasn't just financial. It was spiritual, moral, emotional. And in that collapse, Denzel realized that true ruin isn't the fall of a company. It's the loss of what truly mattered, too late to fix. Denzel's once celebrated mansion, filled with polished wood and imported decor, had become a monument of mourning. The curtains remained closed for days. Dust began to gather on expensive furniture. The kitchen, once bustling with chefs and caterers, now smelled like unused steel and distant memories. Denzel roamed its halls barefoot, often dressed in the same trousers for days, his beard unshaven and eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. He had fired his house staff, not out of anger, but because he couldn't bear the pity in their eyes. He needed silence, space, time to weep, time to remember. He carried his mother's old photo wherever he went, sometimes holding it like a child holds a teddy bear. At night, he would place it on her scarf on his bed, whispering apologies until his voice broke. One night, he stood by the fireplace and looked at the awards on the mantel. He picked up a glass plaque, the Tech Trailblazer of the Year award, and stared at his smiling face etched into it. Then, without thinking, he threw it into the fireplace. The glass shattered, the metal frame twisting in the flames. One by one, he began tossing his trophies into the fire. His Forbes recognition, his honorary doctorate plaque, the crystal globe from the Global Tech Forum. None of this mattered to her, he whispered. None of this brought her joy, if I couldn't even say her name. He emptied his designer watches into a box and donated them. Took down his framed photo with a former president. The only thing he left untouched was the worn letter she had written, the one that still sat open on his pillow like a wound. The pain became a routine. Mornings began with guilt. Evenings ended with silence. He had installed a portrait of her above his staircase, drawn from the old photo of her smiling at the Acra stand. He stood before it daily, sometimes talking to it, sometimes crying, sometimes too ashamed to look up. Mama, I've lost everything, except your voice in my head. One night, he cooked Acra again, not because he could eat, but because he wanted to smell her memory. He burned the first few batches, his hands clumsy, his eyes blurred with tears. But when he finally got one just right, he placed it on a plate, walked to her portrait, and said, I remember now. He left it there, an offering, a symbol, a sorrow too deep for words. The mansion, once a throne of pride, had become his ash-covered temple of grief. And no matter how much wealth he once had, he knew he would never taste peace again. 3 weeks later, Denzel returned to Yamuz, dressed in plain native wear and slippers, carrying a basket of Acra he had made himself. The villagers watched in silence as he walked slowly through the familiar roads he once raced on as a child chasing kites, now feeling like sacred ground. He no longer wore watches or sunglasses. He looked older, sunken, stripped the armor of ego. When he reached the graveyard behind the mango tree, he knelt by his mother's grave without a word. The cross was still there, the white scarf faded, but intact. Gently, he placed the basket beside the grave and whispered, I made them myself. Not as good as yours, but I'm learning. His voice cracked on the last word. He bowed his head and sat beside the grave, as if expecting her to reply. But there was only breeze and silence and birdsong in the trees above. He sat for hours, reading her letter aloud, wiping tears from his cheeks. I've built companies, crossed oceans, dined with kings, he said, but nothing made me feel more whole than sitting by your side, eating from your hand. He pulled out a small journal and began writing letters to her, pages of unspoken truths. I wish I had introduced you as my mother. I wish I'd told Vanessa about the Acra stand. I wish I had said your name on TV. I wish. The list went on, but so did the tears. An old woman passed by and offered him a drink of water. He nodded silently in gratitude. No speeches, no cameras, no entourage. Just Denzel, no longer a billionaire, no longer the polished speaker, but a broken son, seeking redemption where only soil now listened. Before he left, he took a piece of the red earth from her grave and placed it in a small pouch. "I'll keep it with me," he said. "So wherever I go, you're there too." He kissed the cross and whispered one final prayer. "Rest now, Mama. You gave everything. And I, though too late, I will never forget again." As he turned to walk away, a breeze swept through the trees, rustling the mango leaves. He paused, closed his eyes, and imagined her humming, like she used to when she cooked. That was enough. Just a whisper of her love carried on the wind. And though her body lay still beneath the earth, her memory had finally risen, not just in his heart, but in the man he now swore to become. Denzel stood before the town hall of Umuz, flanked by his assistant and a truck carrying supplies, medical kits, school books, generators, and freshly painted signs that read, "The Evelyn Obi Foundation for Hope." He had sold 3 of his cars, liquidated his private art collection, and transferred the funds into a trust in her name. This was his attempt at atonement. His speech was short, delivered from the steps of the town center to a small crowd of curious villagers. "I was born here, but I forgot where I came from," he admitted. "This is for the woman who gave me everything and received nothing in return. This is for my mother." The moment he said the word mother, a tear slipped down his cheek. For the first time, he didn't wipe it away. He let it fall, like an offering, like truth finally spoken. But the villagers did not clap. An old man stepped forward, the same one who had directed Denzel to his mother's grave. "Your mother used to sit in this hall," he said bitterly. "She begged us for money for medicine, cried here on her knees when she thought you were dead or lost. We gave her water when she had no tears left." Others nodded, their faces unreadable. One woman, Mama F., stepped up. "You denied her in public, shamed her before the world, and now you want to paint walls in her name." Her voice cracked, more with pain than anger. "Your charity is good, but your guilt cannot feed a corpse. Your gifts cannot hear. They cannot hug." Denzel's hands trembled. He tried to respond, but no words came. His tongue was a stone, his heart an open wound. The mayor took the microphone and, out of mercy, invited the supplies into the hall. Children clapped as they received books, and nurses unpacked medicine. But Denzel was left alone outside, watching through the windows. Even in giving, he was an outsider. Even in honoring her, he could not erase the shame of what he had done. A little girl tugged his shirt and handed him a drawing, a stick-figure woman with a crown, holding Acra in one hand and a boy in the other. "Mama Evelyn," she said. "That's what my mama says she looked like." Denzel knelt and kissed the paper. "She was a queen," he whispered. "I just forgot." That night he returned to the grave again, his gifts received, but his soul still in debt. Denzel never returned to the city the same way again. He bought a small house in the outskirts of Umuz, built with his own hands and local help. No more chandeliers, no staff, no granite walls, just a simple structure, painted in soft yellow, with a mango tree in the front and a small wooden bench beneath it. Every morning, he sat there and wrote letters to his mother. He never posted them. He simply folded them and placed them in a chest beside her scarf. Some days, he visited the school his foundation rebuilt. Other days, he wandered the village offering to help children with homework, speaking of kindness, of remembrance, and of the cost of forgetting. His name was no longer Denzel Obi the Tech King. It was simply Mama Evelyn's son. On the first anniversary of her death, he invited no press, no dignitaries. He carried a single white rose, a plate of freshly fried Acra, and her framed photo to the grave. He knelt, just as he had the year before, and whispered, "I kept you in the shadows, Mama, but now I carry you everywhere I go. You are the voice behind every breath I take. I am no longer ashamed." The wind whistled through the mango tree, gently lifting the corner of her scarf. He placed the rose down, sat beside the grave, and sang her favorite hymn softly. Though the road be rough and stormy, his voice cracked, but he kept singing. A few villagers stood at a distance, watching quietly, respectfully. They no longer murmured. They no longer judged. They understood now that some griefs do not end. They only find new homes in the spaces where forgiveness can no longer speak. In the final scene, Denzel is seen sitting alone at dusk, the red sky bleeding into the horizon behind him. The grave sits beside him. The wind is still. He whispers, "I was too late, Mama, but I hope heaven is kinder than I was." He closes his eyes, not in peace, but in surrender. The mansion in Lagos stands empty. The awards gather dust. The name Denzel Obi fades from headlines. But beneath the mango tree, next to a simple mound of red earth, lives a man who finally remembered the cost of silence, and the woman whose voice still echoes through the life he almost lost. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.